Coming up, as the Brooklyn Nets prepare to take the court once more on Friday night, the Cam Johnson conversation heats up around potential trade partners. The Golden State Warriors want back in the championship caliber mix. We dive into the possibilities coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast, right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Armbrecht. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We are 100% free on all those great platforms, and remind you that Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up today at robinhood.com/gold, excuse me. And Doug, where we begin is, unlike talking about Dennis Schroeder and complicated or where's the landing spot going to be, unlike Ben Simmons and how he'll spend his offseason away from the NBA landscape, Cam Johnson is going to be on another basketball team sooner than later. The question is where and for how much.
Yeah, it sure seems like it. I mean, dialed up some of the talk earlier this week with his name being put out there more, and just like kind of confirming what we already thought, right? Was that like a bunch of teams are going to be interested in his services. The Nets are open for business. They recognize what's happening here. Removing Schroeder from the team would almost like for sure guarantee a full tank, right, from the rest of the season, almost no matter what. And then specifically, the Warriors came up as a team who could be interested in kind of this. I mean, I'll just read the original report, because Shams Charania originally says, clicked off it. The Nets have received trade interest and opened exploratory conversations around forwards Cam Johnson and Dorian Finney-Smith and guard Dennis Schroeder. Sources say Brooklyn has amassed significant cap and asset flexibility, an NBA high $60 million plus in salary cap over the next summer, and 12 first round picks. There you go. And 11 seconds eligible for trade, yada, yada, yada. So that is like pretty definitive reporting and not all that surprising, because it's like, hey, they've opened up talks. These guys are on the block. And then the Warriors mentioned as a team who would be in that. And there's some interesting, pieces to kind of think about bringing back from the Warriors, who around Steph still want to try to win here, right? They're 14-10. Like, this is a team that very much, still feels like it has some kind of window. And I think there's probably a lot that makes sense about this trade. With the caveat saying, like, with Cam Johnson, we've found lots of teams that make sense with him.
Well, right. I was going to say, unlike some other situations where we said you had to scrape to figure out how to make the money work, or a team that needs the value, and it's also going to give the Nets back the value that they want. When you hear the rumors that the Nets may be holding a potentially first-round pick value for Dennis Schroeder, it brings back all those same old feelings you get with Sean Marks of, okay, now, buddy, let's calm down. People are interested. Let's start setting a bar that's too high. With the Warriors, I think you hit it right there, too, because there's unique situations. Like when you think about the Lakers at times, everyone, or at least my perception is, well, this isn't the version of the Lakers that's going to be championship competitive. LeBron eventually is going to move on. They're going to have to retool things probably around AD, like all these different ideas of what that team will look like. And that's true for a lot of rosters. For the Warriors, you still have Steve Kerr in place. There's no new head coach, right? Like the Lakers have decided to do with Redick. You still have Steph Curry, and you still have Draymond Green, his pet monster. So when you have guys that have won at the highest level, have won championships, and the head coach in place, I think there's always the desire to keep that window open or push it open a little bit wider for as long as you possibly can. So when it comes to Cam Johnson, it makes sense to say, hey, we go get Cam Johnson, and we're extending this window, not just right now, but then over the next 2 years, we can think about how do we continue to retool this roster to make it high-level competitive. And that's why I find it one of the more fascinating teams to have the conversation with, because it makes sense going all directions here, as opposed to other teams that want to improve their chances or think they could be something. The Golden State Warriors know that they're capable of it, and they've in the past been able to create the rosters that accomplish that.
Yeah, like either they know they're capable of it, or they at least feel, beholden to Curry to like make a go at it, right? Like,
yes,
his
and
window,
having Curry means we try.
Yeah, for sure. Like, he's 36. He's probably like 2 years, 3 years left.
God.
Yeah. I mean, he's a 4-year college player. Remember, like he went to
No, I
Davidson
know. It's
forever.
just nuts, though. I
Like,
mean, it's really just we're older. You know what I mean? Like it's just a reality check because he's been around so long and he plays so young, or he looks so young still that
yeah,
you forget that he is 36.
yeah, exactly. So, a couple years left for him, although, he's still shooting 41%. Like there's been a little drop off here from three. I mean, there's been a little drop off here, but overall, like he's an icon. They want him to close it out here with Golden State. Like, unlike letting Clay go, I
Yeah.
think that, they're very incentivized to make sure he stays in that uniform, I think, all the way through to the end. And you have to sort of thread the needle when it comes to that, because they had some chances at that with draft picks where they just kind of got lucky, right? And then it just doesn't really happen. Like Wiseman's a total bust. They get the Kuminga thing, who we're going to talk about here in a second.
Mm-hmm.
He's kind of like not panning out. Pods looked like he was going through something there last year, and he's been awful this season. And so there's pieces here that like probably could have bridged the generational gap between Curry and some of these other guys, but they just struck out on the draft picks. Like they had chance. I mean, to spike the Wiseman pick and just blow it is like it's hard to recover from stuff like that. That being said, when you look at their team, they are a team that can put together the contracts to make a trade happen. They do have some young players that we mentioned that maybe the Nets are willing to just go reclamation-ish project on and just see what they can get from them. And so I think there's like a decently clean fit here. And remember, what's so funny with the NBA is that the incentives are just so funny for some of these teams. Some teams you look at and you're like, okay, like they want to make a playoff push, right? Some teams are like, oh, they want to make a championship push. Some teams are like, hey, we want to make a playoff push, and we kind of have this guy that we want to make sure he's happy all the way through the end. And that's like, the case with LeBron. It's a case with Curry. Sure. Like there's certain guys that elevate themselves to that status, and you sometimes do make negative EV like decisions because the positive expectation around the vibes is worth more. And that's a very, very difficult thing to quantify, I think, sometimes.
Yeah, it's a good reminder on it. And obviously, when you look at the draft, I'll call them failures for the Golden State Warriors, is also what puts you in this spot too, right? Because you didn't feel like let's progress out of the Steph Curry area. Not that they're going to move on from him. They want to retire. You feel like we actually need to make some adjustments here on the fly because we didn't supplement the way that, by the way, we started our dynasty in the first place, right? Drafting Curry and Green and having Klay Thompson as well. Then you built around them and off you went on this dynasty run. So it's interesting to see how it works out. Coming up here in a second, I want to talk about not only the packages that maybe make sense for the Brooklyn Nets coming back, whether or not getting reclamation projects is still a part of the equation for the Brooklyn Nets over strictly draft capital. We'll discuss all those angles coming up here in just one moment.
All right. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.25% APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on IRA account contributions. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply for product-specific disclosures. Visit Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risks. Rates may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC.
All right, so as we continue today's Locked On Nets episode, talking about the predetermined outcome that Cam Johnson will be traded and whether or not the Golden State Warriors are the place for him. One notable thing, too, when you talk about the Golden State Warriors, they are 9th in the league in points per game. So their offense is humming along. Everything's going great. They are the 21st ranked. The 13th in points per game. I want to make sure I get that right. But they're 21st in field goal percentage. So, I mean, even just on the surface, when you pause for it, you go, well, that seems like that's a hard thing to pull off, to be that much higher in points per game over your field goal percentage. And even just on the surface of that, bringing in Cam Johnson, who's having his career year from the field, from beyond the arc, basically, points per game, that's a very easy plug and play for the Golden State Warriors to say, maybe we've run a little bit lucky here in how we've gotten, to this point of the season. Let's try to bolster those numbers. We talked about this with a team who's far worse in some of these categories, like Orlando, who at some point you have to have the self-reflective conversation. The record may be X, but it doesn't mean that we're actually as good as that says right now.
Yeah, and they're, by the way, and I just had it in front of me. They are 14th in 3-point shooting this year, the
Right.
Warriors.
So
So the field goal, and that's with Curry, right? And so Curry taking all the threes at 41%, and
right.
it's kind of like nobody else can make any. That's sort of the way the problem is playing out for the Warriors here, because like I mentioned, some of these other guys like Kuminga shooting 31% from three.
Fine.
Pods shooting 25%. Geez, 25% from three. That's
No
wild
problems
too,
there.
because like Hield is shooting 43%, Curry shooting 41%, and that is on like 16-ish threes a game.
Yeah.
So that's a wild stat. 16 threes a game from those two guys at over 40%. It literally is those two guys make all theirs, and everyone else is Brick City. And
Right,
so
right.
it's a very funny kind of stat when you lay it out like that. But so I think it's like a clean fit. They could use a little more size defensively. DFS here fits too. I think that, like, again, when we look at, I just never think we're going to have trouble finding landing spots for Cam Johnson just for starters.
No.
Like, we've already done that. We've found multiple teams that he could go to. I think that actually makes me very confident that he's going to get traded. Just when you just simply roll down the list of teams that he could go to, the list is so long that it's just like, where's this? It's going to happen. With DFS,
Well, we would enter Sean Marks, come on now, buddy, territory. If you got, if you don't see the trade happen, what you see in the past from him, but it'd be like, now, we all know the offers are on the table and you have to pull the trigger.
That's a great call by you, because, unlike with McHale, let's say, where I was like, I don't know, I think probably teams want him. What's the price they're going to want? This is weird. He actually was thing that I talked about before, this vibes thing where it's like, I don't know, how much are the vibes worth? Because we could get into scary territory here. If you think the vibes are worth a lot, like the locker room, Brooklyn Bridges Twins thing is like worth more. Cam, I don't think we're probably running that risk at this point. So I think the list is so long, but it's funny with the Warriors, and we'll get to some, just examples of possible trades with these guys in a second, but you can make a case for all three of these guys with the Warriors, because like Schroeder would actually fit here too. Like Schroeder is a backup point guard to Steph, as a secondary ball handler as a ball handler off the bench that could like take some load off him without losing too much offensively. You'll lose a lot, but like you're not gonna crater with him coming off the bench, because they really don't have that guy right now either. So I actually think there's worlds where we couldn't really put the full packages together when it came to Schroeder and Cam and DFS. Actually, I think the Warriors are a situation. It's a little weird with the money, but narrative wise and sort of just like basketball wise, I think you can actually tell a story where it's like, hey, you want Schroeder, you want all these guys, like they kind of all make sense. And I that is where it's usually unlikely that these things happen, but I can at least tell a story with the Warriors, unlike any other team. I can't tell the three guy story with the Warriors like I can with this case.
There's not often where a team on the fly mid-December goes, we're going to pull the trigger on a 3-player swap here to basically reshape your entire roster, and depending on how you slice it, how many guys into the starting lineup, etc. But let's just on the Cam Johnson front, what is your ideal, or at least workable, right? What's the workable trade from the Golden State Warriors coming over before we even talk about how many picks do we think we're going to be attached to this? Because the weird part of this is with making the money work. Again, everybody wants to say we'll take whatever we like, and you'll get Cam Johnson plus multiple first-round picks going out for years to come. What is the package that you think and that gets it done? But what makes the money work first and foremost?
Okay, well, the money is not too bad because they have Melton, and then the Anthony Melton's name has already been mentioned as like a guy that the Warriors are probably going to throw out here to trade. He makes about 13, so like that starts getting you there on the money. And then you have to cobble some other stuff together. They have Kyle Anderson at 8.7. They have, GB2 at 9. He's kind of important to what they do with Steph, but like not maybe crazy important. So those guys together, let's say they're just like not all that big a part of what the team is doing right now. You get to like 30 million right there with those guys, right? So I think the money, Melton can't be traded to the 15th, but whatever, 2 days away from that. So I think money wise, at least for just Cam, it's not really that difficult right now. The question is, after even like Cam plus DFS is not that difficult, honestly. Once you start throwing in guys like Kuminga, like Pods, like guys like this, where it's like, maybe these are the kinds of guys that are included. This is where I find it to get very tricky. And I'm going to caveat by saying, I just admit, I know everyone wants to be like Dunning-Kruger theory with their insane overconfidence with how they value picks and players and stuff like this. And that drives me nuts because the more confident you are, the less I believe that
Less
you know.
confident I am in you.
Yeah, totally. If you come in snap call confidence around how draft picks are valued and players, I immediately do not value your opinion at all, because there's so much nuance to this that you just tattle on yourself. And so that being said, I would like to hear your opinion here. I will comment this way. I never feel so comfortable when we get into the picks plus young players category around being able to really determine like what the value is here. But it would be great for you to just, I probably ruined the joke.
You blew it. You blew it. You had me all teed up. You did everything right, except for the part where you mentioned it. Because I was going to come in, bull over the head, and just say, I am so bullish about the value of these picks.
Don't put me in the groundlings, buddy. I'm not a yes and guy. I'm a no but guy. I blew it. Yeah, that was bad. I should have seen that.
I'm a no stop guy. I'm not a yes and guy.
Yeah, shoot.
No, there is. So the one part of this before we talk about that, because I think what's interesting is what are the Nets value, right? Do they value maybe? Because if you start to get into the conversation, as you mentioned, about a Pods or about a Kuminga, well, you're telling yourself a story about the future of this team. And that's interesting because we've already said the Nets have a lot of young guys on their roster. We may turn around next year with 4 first-round draft picks, and the roster could look starkly different. So there has to be something in the equation for the Brooklyn Nets and for the Golden State Warriors of, we're going to give you guys that we spent first-round draft capital on. You may say, yeah, but they're not as good as that capital. It doesn't matter to the team that drafted them. They want to recover that. So if you give away a couple of guys that were drafted in the first round, we'll go ahead and take that off the top. So then it becomes, do we just want more draft picks? And the nice thing about it from a Golden State Warrior standpoint and for the Brooklyn Nets is, the one thing I do think about picks is, when you own your own picks, which the Golden State Warriors do next year, 26, 27, 28, they're set up just insanely enough, pretty normal when it comes to their draft capital. It makes it easier, I think, for a team like the Warriors to say, we will give you a first-round pick or 2 in the next couple of drafts because we believe we're going to be competitive. We believe that our draft picks are going to be as low as possible in those rounds. When you start doing all the swapping, as teams do, all of a sudden it's actually trickier, because the whole point of getting somebody else's first round pick is they're going to suck and we're going to spike something high. It's why the Nets had to battle to get control of their own draft capital back. So that part of the equation, at least from a teams and landing spot standpoint, I think the Warriors are a really good partner, because they're going to be as bullish as anyone that our picks are going to be hold as little value as possible. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, but it also devalues the picks on the net side, right? So
now reverse it and say, what was it going to mean for the Brooklyn Nets? And that's why they're doing the equation of player or pick value.
Right. So this is why when I stepped on your joke before, which was brutal, and I'll never recover from it, but this is why it gets very difficult, because once you take on that theory with the Warriors, then that instantly devalues a first round pick from teens to mid-20s or something like that, right? And so, and if it's they probably wouldn't re-sign Schroeder, but let's say you ship all these guys, then you have these floor-raising guys. It is going to be hard, even with a Steph injury, to be so bad, right? And so the pick is just never really likely to be all that high.
And the last note on this before we turn it over and talk about a couple other angles with this potential trade is, if you are the Nets and these trades are happening sooner than later, as it seems like they could, it does give you a longer runway if you're getting some younger talent to say, we get the rest of this year from mid-December all the way through the end of the season to evaluate and figure out who fits where. Other side of it, who stands to benefit on the Brooklyn Nets if Cam Johnson's not a part of it? Let's talk a little bit about Jalen Wilson and the rest of his season and other angles of this trade to close things out in just one moment.
All right, get ready to tackle the NFL action with the FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Get in the NBA action as well. Right now, new customers can bet $5, get $150 in bonus bets if you win. FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, on the NBA. It's all in one place. You go over to FanDuel Sportsbook right now. That's finally back. That's basketball. Finally back in action here Friday night against the Grizzlies. Started at 10.5. Oh, my God, no belief in the Nets. It's up to plus 11 for the Nets right now. Remember, as a reminder to everyone, one of the best teams in the NBA against the spread this year. You know why? That's exceeding expectations. Just got to get within 11 on this over at our friends on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. I got there. I'm so upset by this plus 11. I'm struggling to get through it. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 real money bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
All right, so as we wrap up today's Locked On Nets episode, taking a look at Cam Johnson, specifically the Golden State Warriors' potential for a trade. I'd love the version of this, by the way, where somehow they cobble together the package that is Dorian Finney-Smith, Dennis Schroeder, and Cam Johnson all go to the Warriors, just for the thrill of it, just for the excitement of watching three players go out all in one
for the content, just for the content. As I always say, I don't care what happens as long as the content is good. Like, just do these crazy things just so we have like multiple podcasts to talk about it. Like, I fire one of these guys into the sun for all I care. As long as we can talk, make a really cool title about it. That's all I care about. That's all I care about. It's all the content, bro.
Titles, and thumbnails, and SEO, baby. That's what we're about here. Now, from a brief Nets perspective, the nice thing about it for them too, not that they're overly concerned about this when it comes to trading away some of these veterans. But it is nice that you have a player in Jalen Wilson who this season has played in 23 games, is averaging 25 minutes, 43% from the field, 34, almost 35% from beyond the arc, knocking down free throws, has taken a progressive step forward. Do you think the one thing I wonder about, not with trading or not trading a player like Cam Johnson, but do you think it's going to be interesting to see how the Nets manage the young players? Because the one thing that is nice about having the veterans is it offers coverage for some of the younger guys. It means that when they have a great game, you get awesome. And now we're going to reduce your minutes for the next game. Just enjoy that thrill. There is a part of this where the development is going to get exposed here on some of these guys, or where they are in their careers is going to get exposed a little bit. There can be a grind here. Like I even think about this when it comes to, we can talk about it next week, when Cam Thomas comes back from injury. He won't be in for Friday night. 19th, I think, is his target return date. Hey, losing 7, 8, 12 games in a row, losing 15 out of 20, that grinds dudes down, and it can test the fortitude of young players and staying the course on, we grind it every possession. When we talk about Jordi Fernandez, we talk about it being the veterans that are leading the way in that process in a lot of regards. So you are going to lose something in making these decisions and put other guys in difficult spots.
And I want to come back to this Warriors just idea real quick before we go. At the end, I'll say this, and then I want to just flop back to the Warriors for 1 second. But it actually goes hand in hand to this, because remember, these trades never happen in a vacuum. It's not like these three guys get sent out and no one comes back, right? Like, often it's going to be aggregated salaries because they're just to make the money work, right? And so we are in a situation that, yes, I believe that, this is probably a flip-flopping around some of these young guys on the Nets eventually. There's also just going to be minimum 1 to 2, 3, 4 guys new in uniform that probably are going to want some playing time too. So that's why it's always a little hard to predict, because let's say a Warriors trade you make, it's going to involve probably bringing back like one of these dudes, a couple of dudes that just can play. Right. Yes. And so does that make sense? Like, I don't want to dodge the question here, but it's it's hard to even predict that, because it's not like these guys just get shipped out and they just call up Killian Hayes from the G League. Like, that's not going to happen. Like, they're just going to be other NBA players that have to come back. It's the only way it works.
And in most of these situations, actually, it's going to be multiple players that come back, right? It's not going to, the Nets are always going to be on the one out to multiple back. So yeah, and I think to your point, even if it's veteran guys that come back, like, that's a little bit different. Maybe you can say that could be a buyout guy, or it could be a guy you're not the same way. If it's young guys, like we talk about with Golden State, if you're getting back a couple of young players, you 100% want Jordi Fernandez to get his hands on them and to get the minutes and to see what you have, because now you'll be looking at the roster for the rest of the season and say, well, we got 12 guys under the age of 24. They're all not going to play next year. They all can. And then we're going to add 4, 20-year-olds next season, under 20-year-olds. So when we turn around and we've got an entire roster filled with sub 25-year-old players, we're going to have to shake this out somehow. So the more information you can get, the better. What before you circle back, what was so humorous about mentioning Jordi Fernandez getting his hands on these players?
You said it. I think you kind of said it. You said it pretty clearly. You said it again.
Well, by the way, he wants to get his hands on these players. He wants to get his hands on the players of the other team. It's just Jordi Fernandez wants to be involved, and that's
whatever he can get his hands on. I have a question. I do have a question for you about Kuminga specifically. Like, when it comes to Kuminga, 22 years old, obviously high draft capital. It's kind of like not really worked out across the board for him. Like, he's the kind of guy. So, because we talk about like a trade happening, you feel like he'd be in there. I don't know. I'm not positive about that, but it feels like he's the kind of guy where you don't ship off a draft pick, but you send a 22-year-old former lottery pick back, where it's like not totally fitting. You know what I mean? Like, where do you value him? Because if you send him back, you're getting less picks back for sure.
Yes.
But he's a guy we've talked about for years now with him. And I'm just like, not sure. I would risk it and do it, but it's just like that's like these are the weird. Like I don't think they give up on Pods this early, even though he's been brutal. And I think there's actually our Warriors fans that kind of don't like his attitude. I've seen that little things about that, but I don't know with Kuminga specifically because he's a guy that will come up. Like if they make a trade, it'll be either a question of why didn't you get him or what was he worth as compared to draft picks. Like he's an interesting kind of character.
And if you say 2027 first round pick included or 2027 first round pick not included, right? And that's the Kuminga in or Kuminga out of the deal. That'll be the explanation of it. It's not going to be hard to figure that out on the back end if you're a fan wondering why or why not. The hard part for me with Kuminga would only be because we now speaking of Jordy Fernandez getting his hands on people, is that it is Steve Kerr and it is the Golden State Warriors, and they've been a very good, they've been one of the best franchises over the recent history of the NBA. So you're not coming from a spot where when we talk about making trades with Detroit or even, maybe a trade with Orlando, still a young team where you go, I don't know. Did they know what to do with their young talent? Did they develop well? So in this instance, you go, well, if you couldn't make it with the Golden State Warriors, but the caveat here is Golden State has been very hesitant to give him up. So I think they also have a sense of we got him. And now we want the value of reclamating this player.
I'll push back on that actually, because I'd say the flip side to that coin would be name me a player they have developed. It was
interesting enough. After you get past their core three, then you look at the recent history and you say, well, are these guys developing players? So you're right. And it's almost, it is an interesting dynamic because of how long they've been around and how successful the organization has been overall. Right?
Wiseman, Pods, Moody doesn't play really that much.
All these, so they have struck out in recent drafts. You're right.
It's like all their draft picks, draft picks have not hit. So at that point, you'd say to yourself, maybe these guys can't really do it. Like maybe
you just got lucky that you had Steph Curry and Clay and Draymond, and they just kind of did a lot of the work for you, or just the right type of player for what you wanted to do.
Not taking anything away from those the championships. It's like one of the all-time great teams. It's not that. It's just like if you stop there on the timeline and then look at everything else, it's been a disaster. These guys have all not worked out. Basically, I mean, Pods was good last year, but they basically all not worked out. So then you say to yourself, well, maybe it is a you problem. And some of these guys have a little more in them. I don't know. I think you could be bullish maybe on some of these guys.
And I would say in this instance, my final thought is if I have the option between Pick and Kuminga, man, I probably in this moment I lean Kuminga because he's still just 22 years old. He's played 230 NBA games. He fits the timeline. And I think if we really believe in Jordy Fernandez and what he's building, you want to think that hey, give him the runway and he'll figure this guy out. Even if it's not to the height of what his draft status suggests, still a valuable player to have in your rotation.
All right, here we go. Cam Johnson, Dorian Finney-Smith, Dennis Schroeder. Forward, DeAnthony Melton, Gary Payton, Kyle Anderson, Buddy Hield, Kevon Looney, Jonathan Kuminga, Guy Santos. Maybe throwing a pick gets it done. Yeah. It's one of those all-time. It's one of those ones. People send me these trades all the time. It's like you can't even read them on the Twitter screen because they're just they're so small. There's so many players involved that you need to
a dossier of one.
You got to do Zoom 400 and start scrolling around to be able to see who even the names are included are. Okay, we're gonna get out of here. Much appreciated. Nets finally back in action here Friday night. Make sure that you are subscribed to Locked On Nets over on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
Speaking of comedic timing and fathers, you can tell what was the best year of your father's life because they seem to freeze that clothing style and ride it out. That's true of Doug Norrie, and it's true from our friend Jerry Seinfeld.
That's so funny. You gave that as a quote. I was like, oh, this is going to submarine this thing. I took a walk this morning, and you know me, buddy. I walk every morning. We never close this out. I took a walk this morning, and I journal after I walk usually, and I write in just whatever. And all my writing this morning.
Screw up joke today on show. It was good to journal that.
No, my writing was. This is so wild. My writing was about how when we look back at shows, we kind of anchor ourselves as those people being older and those styles as being older, even though they were younger than us at the time. And I specifically, I should I'm going to show this right here. I was specifically writing about Seinfeld and how we view those guys as older, even though they were much younger than us at the same time. So that's an unbelievably weird quote that you would bring that up. I mean, 40 minutes before, this is what the exact thing I was writing about: clothing styles, age, and everything else. What
a sign the simulation is working.
That is, it's working very well. Thank you, everybody. We'll be one of the all-time great posts. We're back again tomorrow, next week, talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball.